Welcome back to Conscious Not Crazy. I'm Kori, your host, and I'm grateful to be here. And I'm especially grateful to have a guest today. Some of you may know him. Joel Goldberg is with me. He is an Emmy award-winning sports broadcaster. He has his own podcast, Rounding the Bases. He is also a keynote speaker. That's how our paths crossed, and written some books. How many books? Two?
Two.
Yeah, 2 books. And your newest book just came out.
Newest book came out this year, Small Ball, Big Dreams. The first one was Small Ball, Big Results. Not everybody, but people are like, when are you writing your third? Is there going to be a third? And I guess my answer is probably,
Yeah.
but not in a rush.
Yeah, that's good. That's
It
awesome.
takes time.
Well, I'm grateful to have you here. I have a parenting podcast,
Yeah.
but there's this whole correlation
I'm
between
a parent too.
Yeah. And then you work with athletes,
Yeah.
and you've experienced a lot of work with athletes over the years because you've been in Kansas City with the Royals for 17 years. Is that right?
I've been here a little over 17 years, so 18 seasons, 17
Okay.
and a half-ish years.
Yeah.
We moved here in 2008.
Awesome.
Crazy.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit, or tell our audience a little bit, just how you got into broadcasting and keynote speaking and becoming an author and a podcaster. So just a little background on you.
Yeah, the broadcasting preceded all of it, and the broadcasting was the dream. I always like to start many of my keynote speeches by just saying, do you remember a time growing up when you thought you knew what you wanted to be when you were all grown up? And everybody shakes their head. And then the question is, how many of you ended up getting where you thought you were going to go? Or how many of us ended up doing something different? And everybody kind of nods along. And I say, I'm the guy that actually ended up doing what I dreamed of doing from as early as 7 to 8 years old, of being on TV talking about sports. What I could not have envisioned was the fulfillment that came from it that really had nothing to do with sports, the lessons learned, and then the speaking, the podcast. Podcasts, by the way, didn't exist when we were growing up.
Right.
The books, all this type of stuff. So none of this was in the plan other than it was my dream to be on TV. And I think for me, at least, the beautiful part about it is eventually figuring out, I've been in TV 31 years now, eventually figuring out after about 25, not quite, 22, 23 years, that there's more to be done than just television. The television kind of gave me the platform to start all these other things,
Right.
which, by the way, anybody could start all of these things. You want to be a speaker? Go do it. You want to write a book? Go do it. You want to host a podcast? Go do it. Want to be a television broadcaster? It's a little tougher, although I would say you can do that now too with Instagram Reels and Snapchat and YouTube and all of these things. So really, we're at a point in time where everyone can do any of this.
Right.
Now, how you get noticed and how you stand out is a totally different discussion. But for me, the TV, which was the original plan and is still going, was the launching pad for everything else that I didn't know existed.
So what do you think so how do you, because you're right, most everybody says, I want to grow up and be like my son. I know he said when he was younger, I want to be an NFL, player, but it's a very small percentage of people that make it to that level. So what do you attribute the fact that you actually got to do?
Well, first thing I would say is that anyone that tells you, now I understand that there probably aren't a bunch of teenagers, middle schoolers listening to this, but their parents might be.
Right.
And so the one thing I would say is that everyone should have those dreams. I want to play in the NFL one day. I want to play in the NBA one day. Yeah, you're probably not tall enough, but not to mention the skills. But you know what? Pursue those dreams. And those dreams will tell you if and when it's time to move on to something else. But I think that the beauty of all of this, and I wanted to hit game-winning home runs in the World Series and hit last-minute shots. And I realized pretty early on that that wasn't going to happen even at like a somewhat respectable level. I mean, I played soccer through high school. I played baseball through 7th grade. Imagine that, a guy that stopped playing baseball after 7th grade, and now I've been broadcasting in the major leagues for years. So, I don't know at what point I realized that I'm not going to be a superstar athlete. Probably at the point that I realized that I wasn't a superstar athlete in my middle school, in my high school.
Right.
But to me, there's nothing worse than telling anyone, especially a kid, you can't do this. So encourage them to try it all out, because if you're really paying attention, that love for, say, wanting to be a superstar athlete, or just fill in the blank and change it. Want to be a rock star, want to be a star in Hollywood, want to be a superstar on Broadway, want to be an astronaut, want to be fill in the blank. Every one of those interests, while they may not seem unreal or may not seem realistic, were unrealistic for anyone that's playing at the highest level. So, a greatest case scenario, you win the lottery and you make it. Slightly better odds than winning the lottery, because you do have
Right.
some control over it. But if you don't have the talent, you don't have a ton of control. But it's also going to open up who knows what other doors. So I believe that anything you pursue in life is accentuated by who you meet, the connections
Right.
you make. And so telling someone no, don't do something deprives them probably not of ultimately making it to the NBA or the NFL. But what if it deprives them of meeting an athletic trainer for, say, the Kansas City Chiefs, that then turns you on to wanting to become a physical therapist, or, on and on and on. And so if your interest is there, do it, but just stay well-rounded and open-minded. And that's true for any of us, by the way. You don't know when you go down a certain path what it's going to open you to. I do think that you asked me how I made it to this point, and the secret sauce for me and everything that I do is relationships and trust.
Right.
And you know, uh, if you have connections, use them, because they're opening doors for you. Then it's up to you to stay. I didn't have
Right.
any of those. I had to create them myself. If you don't have connections, that's exactly it. You say, well, you got to bust the door down. You don't even have to bust the door down. You just have to be able to get to a point where somebody unlocks it for you.
And consistency, I would say.
Consistency.
So, do you so what differentiates a good athlete from a great athlete? Like, is it how they were raised? Is it mindset? Like, is there, over your years of experience and working with a lot of athletes, are there certain qualities you see?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if you have talent, you have talent.
Right.
Talent alone is not going to be enough. I like to say that just fill in the blank. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Patrick Mahomes,
Right.
anybody at that level, anybody that is a Hall of Famer in whatever they do, anybody that is in the discussion for greatest of all time, if they're in GOAT discussion, they have talent. There's no one at that level that is lacking talent.
Right.
At the same time, there's no one at a Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, GOAT level, Patrick Mahomes level that also doesn't have everything else that you mentioned. They're the outliers, because not only do they have talent that none of us can recognize,
Right.
that we all sit there, those are the things that we dreamt of when we were growing up. There are only a handful that do, but they also have the work ethic, they have the discipline, they have the mindset. When you put all of that together with elite level talent, that's when you get the MVPs. That's when you get the greatest of all times. And then there's even higher level, which is a unicorn once in a lifetime, and that would be a Shohei Ohtani. I
Right.
think you could say the same thing about a Michael Jordan. But those guys, the common bond is that they'll outwork anybody. I think what's more relatable to us common folk
Right.
are the grinders, the guys that are playing in all these leagues that are not superstars. Or if they are superstars, it's more based on their work ethic and their mindset than it is the talent. First
Right.
off, Kori, anybody that is playing in Major League Baseball or the NFL, the 53rd guy on the NFL roster, the 26th guy on a Major League Baseball roster is better than almost anyone in the world.
Right.
There's a big gap between them and the Michael Jordans. There's a big gap between them and the Aaron Judges. But they do have a lot of talent, and they're going to outwork everyone. And so I think if you have all of that, there's the combination of being one of the greatest of all time. But if you at least have good talent, meaning you're in the right field, so
Right.
substitute sports for any profession. If you're in accounting and you're good with numbers and all that type of stuff, fill in it with for whatever it is, right?
Right.
Then you got a shot. Now, how do you get better? Strong mind, the work ethic, the consistency, and the discipline that you talked
And
about.
I think it's interesting. So in the world, because we didn't grow up with social media.
No.
And I think we're doing kids a disservice because they're not seeing the work. they're seeing the end result in all aspects of life, not just sports. They're seeing, oh, I want to have that car. I want to be that player, but they were not exposing the work that goes into being that person, that grit and that ethic. And kids are, you know, they don't have a realistic perspective of what that takes. And then I agree with you too. Don't tell the kids they're not capable, because I think too often is in schools and parents unknowingly, because they don't want their kids to be disappointed, shut down the dreams.
Yep.
And we need kids to dream. We need kids because even if they're not going to end up in the NBA, just like you said, you don't know who they're going to meet on their journey to reach that goal. And we don't want to stifle them. So I'm a big, pro dreamer.
Keep dreaming and keep working.
Yep.
The two have to go hand in hand.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Because I do. So do you see a difference with athletes today versus maybe 20 years ago in the kids coming out now that they've grown up with social media? Like, what are some differences you're seeing maybe in the work ethic? Or I see a lot of entitlement out there. And I'm not saying in athletes, just in kids and people in general, and kids afraid of failure. I talk a lot about how parents, now sports, you fail all the time or you're not, especially baseball, right? It's the sport of failure. But as far as I see so many kids afraid to fail or afraid to take the risk, are there differences now with athletes than in the past? Or do you see any major differences?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't, this is,
I guess different challenges.
this is across any profession.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you see with athletes in their 20s is what you're seeing from 20 somethings entering corporate America.
Right.
They're all the same. They were raised the same way. Look, as parents, we all raise our kids differently. I think we've all come to learn, hopefully, that what works for me may not work for you.
Right.
And I'm not going to judge the way you do things. Hopefully you're not going to judge the way I do things. Doesn't mean I'm right every single time, but nobody knows my kids better.
Well, there's no perfect. There's no perfect.
And oh, by the way, every one of these kids, including our own, I mean, how often do you have two kids, 3 kids that are all exactly the same?
Nope.
Right? They have different personalities, they have different intelligence levels, they have different work ethic and all that. And then you hope that they have some of your best qualities as a parent, and they probably have those and some of your worst qualities too,
right.
Because,
we tend to be triggered by with the worst ones.
Sorry, kids for passing that on to you. But I think that, I mean, for me, they're still kids like we were kids.
Yeah.
That part's not different. But when we hear about, say, mental health,
right,
I don't think I grew up knowing anything about mental health, other than maybe there was that one kid or 2 kids or a few kids in your class, in your grade,
right,
in your school that you knew, like, boy, they're, something's not right there, or whatever it is. Now it's almost, if you're making any assumption, it's probably easier just to make an assumption that everybody is dealing with mental health.
Right.
Does that make them different than us? I hear some people from our generation saying, well, we were tougher back then. Well, I don't know about that. We didn't deal with cell phones, social media.
Like people commenting on the athletes and them seeing all of the
It's the same thing. Like I hear athletes from a previous generation saying, well, back when we played, translation, get off my lawn.
Mm-hmm.
The world changes.
Yeah.
Like, if athletes in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, had the tools that they had nowadays, they would be better. The reason why the athletes are better today is because they have more tools that show them immediately how they can get better.
Right.
The flip side of that, more injuries, pushing harder, and less of an ability at times to use your brain because a lot of it is being done for you. So while they have more opportunity to get better because technology is advanced like anything else,
right,
we are smarter because of our cell phones in a lot of ways. We have a lot quicker ability to get knowledge than we did by going to the library and getting the encyclopedia.
And so it's so funny. I was telling my kids about encyclopedias. They're like, what?
Right. But they may not, they have more information at their fingertips.
Right.
But how much more able are they to think for themselves
Right.
because they have come up in a time where you don't have to think for yourselves. And so there's a trade-off to all of it. In the end,
It just is.
17-year-olds are 17-year-olds,
Right.
25-year-olds are 25-year-olds. That doesn't mean they're all the same, but generally, okay, so it's just a little bit different with these times. And the athletes are no different. When I walk into a Major League Baseball clubhouse, they're doing something that all of the rest of us do. They're sitting at their lockers if they're not talking to anyone, and they talk with each other. They'll sit around and socialize. But if they're not, and nobody's talking to them from the media or a coach isn't talking to them, they're sitting with their head down, looking at
At
their
their
phone and scrolling on and on
that
and on,
dopamine
which
hit.
means they're like everybody else.
So something that I share with parents when they're talking to their kids, and again, I never judge parents because we're all going to do it our own way. There's no right or wrong. There's no owner's manual, but I like to just talk about just behavior as a whole. Like I focus on mindset, attention, communication, taking action, which is what you're saying. You're saying don't stifle them, get them to take the action. Who knows where they'll end up? But one of the things I talk about is identity. So Atomic Habits is one of my favorite books, James
Yep,
Clear's
great.
book. And he talks a lot about too often athletic kids, especially kids that grow up their whole life, they identified as an athlete, that it would be better to help them identify with the qualities that make them good at the sport because it's more transferable. So that's something I've shared with parents. Like if you have a child that's an athlete that you're raising, be careful not to put them in a box. You're a baseball player, baseball, 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 because what happens is one day it's not likely they're going to be, playing professional baseball. That's just, they're going to have their last game and nobody prepares them for that. Whereas if we help them identify with the qualities that make them good, that transfers to other things. So, what would be your advice to a parent that is raising a really a great athlete? High level, whether they go pro or not, but they're, very involved in sports. Both my kids play sports, but I don't know if my son may play a college sport. He loves rugby, but who knows?
Look, this is advice not just if they're going into sports, it's for anything.
Right.
Because I had one athlete and one theater kid. And look, if you have the kid that is the star on the team or the lead in every play or fill in the blank, then I actually think that there's some extra challenges there because, again, at some point, like we've established, they're not going to be that anymore.
Right.
So can you learn how to do other things? Can you learn how to be well-rounded? Can you learn how to be a good teammate where they can rely on you, but you can rely on them? Can you learn how to lead? Can you learn how to embrace any type of role? Can you learn how to, as I like to talk about, play small ball, do the little things? And so I think for any parent out there, don't, and I hear athletes say this all the time, don't just lock in on one sport. There's such a temptation right now by kids and especially parents that if I don't make this travel ball team, if I don't make this elite level team, that I'm not going to get to the next level. And I get that. If there's a scholarship on the line, yes. But what most of the experts will say is that they are actually going to be better at what they're doing if they have other skills or other sports. My daughter was in and still is in college in theater, and she'd get anything from an ensemble role to a good role.
Right.
She very rarely got the lead, and of course she wanted the lead, and we would tell her over and over again there are a lot of lessons in this and managing what happens when you don't get what you want and being a good team player. And there was always that, when you don't get what you want, do I want to quit? And I think that because you feel that way in the moment,
Right.
and that's
Right.
very, you talked
It's
about
natural.
entitlement before,
Yeah.
and yeah, it feels like there's more entitlement nowadays. But I think that we're confusing entitlement with the way kids need to be handled because they have grown up in a different culture with all the social media. And we grew up in a culture where it was like, just suck it up and go to work. Well, maybe that wasn't always the best thing. And we have built in our brains that putting our arm around a kid or an employee or whatever it is and saying, hey, look, it's going to be okay, somehow it shows some type of a softness or entitlement or whatever. You can hold people accountable and be disciplined and not be in their face and screaming at them too.
100%.
And so we've evolved that way. But to me, even though my daughter might not have realized it in the moment, Now, as she's in theater school and she's learning to teach theater herself, and as she is in different productions at her college, she is oftentimes on a stage crew, and she's being a producer or a director or a producer and all these type of things. And it's like she was getting tastes of that in high school, and there's such a temptation that I only want this.
Right.
And when I only want this, and as parents, we say we just want to make them happy and we want them to have that too. Yes, you can do that, but don't close your eyes on everything else. To getting back to what I did before, too, every opportunity is a chance to meet people and build relationships and show who you are. And so the more you do, the more people you meet, the more skills you build, and those end up being transferable to the real world.
100%. And to your point, we were raised, so I call it the pendulum theory. And I talk about this in my parenting classes or sessions. We were raised in a generation, children should be seen and not heard. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't cry. Don't be mad. Don't feel your feelings. And those parents are now raising kids. And because they've never dealt, in a lot of cases, not all cases, they've never dealt with their own discomfort. With good intentions, they're overprotecting and saving their kids from all discomfort to a fault. And now those kids aren't having those healthy opportunities for failure or disappointment. Parents are rushing in to save them or to take them their lunch or their homework or talk to the coach for them. I see with my daughter, with the other moms, the moms intervening on the social, you know, the issues with teenage girls. Like, one day one's being nice, the other one's not being nice, and feelings are hurt. And I'm like, the girls this is part of growing up. My daughter has to hurt someone's feelings and be shut out of the group temporarily to understand that's why we don't do that. And that's what that feels like. And then in turn, somebody's going to hurt her feelings and she's going to have to cope with that. So we want to be the coach to our kids and support and lead them while they're still under our roof and deal with those things like not making the team or not making the lead and the production. So 100% so I believe we need to find the middle. We need to be like, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be upset, but we don't quit. We've made a commitment. We don't just quit. And if you want to quit, like my son's been injured and he's been back and forth with this whole football thing this season. And I'm like, you can't just not show up. You either talk to your coach and decide for sure you want to quit or you keep going. And he's frustrated because he doesn't get to do the fun stuff, but he's still on the team. I'm like, if you want to be on the team, you still have to show up even when you're injured. That's just what it looks like. So, yeah. And I think, so we just need to coach them through. Emotions are not bad. Feelings are not bad. They should be, I like saying feelings should be indicators, not dictators.
Yeah. And it's not an easy thing even for us adults to figure out. And so you have to encourage that journey, but they also have to get there themselves too.
Yeah.
We have to let them fail a little bit.
Oh, 100%.
You got to protect them from some things that, that's a personal choice. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that you have to do X amount of this or else. But I just think, I think back to when my kid was playing hockey, and my oldest, and when I was a younger parent, I felt like in the stands I needed to yell everything, and in the car ride home I needed to go over everything. And if I could do it again, and I wasn't awful on the scale of like where some could be, I was probably somewhere in the middle. I could have been a lot better. But in hindsight, there came a certain point where I realized they're not listening to a thing that I'm saying in the stands.
Right.
And at the same time, I'm not even sure they can hear me or he can hear me. Why am I wasting my energy on this? Why am I doing this? I think it's just to make myself feel better.
Right.
Well, this isn't supposed to be about me. It's supposed to be about my kid. And so, that's it to me, is like, we have to let them fail a little bit. You talked about that. But we also want to encourage them to be able to think for themselves.
Yep.
Advocate for yourselves. Advocate for others. That's the way to learn when you're not the star or you are the star, how to be a good teammate. How to be a good leader, and encourage that, and let that be the lesson, because that's transferable for life.
100%. Because 100%, because there's a lot of correlation between sports and leadership.
Totally.
Well, and it's funny because I speak to business, do keynotes for businesses now too. And I talk about it from the lens of becoming a parent, because no different than you yelling from the stands. I felt out of control. Like, I don't like what I'm doing here. I was trying to make this little person do something that they clearly they didn't want to do it. And I'm like, what is going on here? This doesn't feel good. And I had to go back and fix myself, not my child, and be the model of what I wanted them to be. And is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I say better, not perfect. Just try to be better than yesterday. So 100%. Okay. So is there any other advice? So you've got for parents, if they have an athlete that's maybe at that higher level, and do parents get over involved when they're being recruited, and
Oh
is
yeah.
there a lot of pressure? I haven't experienced that. So I'm just curious, like, what does that look like? And what advice would you give to those parents that are experiencing that higher level? Like, what kind of support or what's most helpful? Because even at the younger level, I see parents, just like you said, telling the kid they have to pick a sport and getting a little too involved sometimes. But yeah, so what would your advice be for that parent?
I mean, the obvious one first is make sure your kid loves it.
Right.
I know it's potentially a ticket for a scholarship or whatever it is, but if they don't love it, they're not going to stick with it anyway. It
Right.
is going to fizzle out,
They get burned out.
or if it's eventually going to get there. And so, yeah, sure, maybe you get your education paid for, but how do you want to look back on that? How do you want them to look back on that? But I think my advice overall would just be to listen.
Yeah.
By the way, not I don't encourage anyone just to back off and leave it alone. Like
Mm-mm.
you are your kid's safety net, and you are there because you've lived a life so far that has some of these experiences. But there are also times when parents haven't been through this. Maybe they weren't an athlete themselves, and I think that there's just something to be said about being curious, asking other parents, asking other people. Ask the most level-headed people how they go about it, not the
Right.
ones that are making the most noise at the practices and the games, because that's probably what you want to avoid. And by the way, everybody's going to convince you that this is the way to do it in this way. Ultimately, you got to do what's good for you, and you got to live. But there's still something to be said. Like, we're in this day and age right now where everything's automated and
Mm-hmm.
everything is done for you. Hey, you might even be able to go on to ChatGPT or any AI service and say, what's some good advice, or give me some articles, or blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. But in the end, just as is the case with AI, just as in the case with, mentors or anybody you ask, in the end, you still got to make a choice of
Right.
how you want to do things. And so, make it your own. That there is no one formula for any of this. I mean, we're touching on some broad points here in terms of being curious and listening and trying everything and
Mm-hmm.
meeting people. And I'm a firm believer in everything we do, people and relationships matter. But I think that it's and just don't forget that this is an important time in their lives, but it's just a time in their lives. Like,
Right.
it's not the end all be all.
Right.
And so I think just trying to be level headed, or even flip the switch a little bit. If it was somebody else's kid, what would I tell them?
Which is a great perspective to kind of step outside of it. And I think, to your point, because what I always tell parents is stop telling, start asking, or even in a
Mhm.
business environment,
Same.
you're because then that requires the child to critically think, which is what you're saying. Kids need critical thinking opportunities. So from an early age, asking them questions so they learn to process. Like, even if they make a mistake or fail or hurt, do something that's hurtful, it's like, well, tell me about that. Why do you think you did that? Because then they can process, and what would you do different next time? And they can change the behavior. Whereas we're just telling them we're noise. They're not necessarily listening to us. Their defenses go up. And in a situation like that, where they're looking at schools, well, what do you value? Like, or what do you like about this school, or what do you like about the sport, or what's drawing you over here? Just getting them to really process what it is, and not listening to their friends and the pressures from the outside. I think that's there's so much information and noise. It's probably hard to tune a lot of that out.
For sure. And in some ways, that's no different than what we grew up with. The expression was
Right.
always keeping up with the Joneses. The problem now is that more Joneses because you got them on social media. You
Right.
still got to be true to who you are.
Right. No, 100%. So let's see. What's one piece of advice? Let's No, biggest challenge as a parent. That's what I was going to ask you. A biggest challenge as a parent, and what did it teach you about leadership, like with your own
Yeah.
kids?
There's so much. I mean, we could go on and on, but now I've got a
It's my life
22. Yeah,
story.
it's everybody's life story. And now we've got a 22 and a 20-year-old. And, I think that when I look back at it as a guy that is gone for 6 months a year,
Right.
I'm gone with the Royals on average every other week for 6 months. But when I'm home for the every other week, I'm at the stadium every day.
Right.
When my kids were younger, I would wake up a little earlier than what I needed to, because that was my 10 minutes with them to drive them to the carpool line. And then I would not see them again if I
Right.
was home, because by the time I got home from work, they were asleep. And then we did it again. So, one, I'm very lucky that my wife's fingerprints are all over how well they've been raised and the manners they have and all of those type of things. And then hopefully they got some of that from me as well. But I just think that it's, for me, as far as advice, just being present,
Yeah.
and that's coming from someone that wasn't always around, being interested in what they're doing. Um, my wife's so great at that, and just supporting, cheerleading, being their biggest fans, making sure that they understand through the good and the bad, the obvious, that you love them. That
Right.
you know, I saw a picture pop up in a memory the other day on my son's birthday, and he was with me in San Francisco for baseball. I think it was I think it was like a picture of us at Alcatraz on an off day or something like that. And he said something like, "Thanks for always being my number one fan."
Aw.
That, yeah, which was sweet. And I was like, I looked at it, I'm like, well, so is your mom, so your grandparents, so are a lot of people in your corner. But it really has to start with us as parents. So they're going to drive you nuts.
Oh gosh, yes.
And the look that you just had and the breath that you just took is a familiar one to me, because they did the same to me. And by the way, it'll never stop.
No.
If we're lucky enough to still be parenting when we're 70,
Right.
80, 90 years old, I mean, my dad's in his 80s, my in-laws are in their 80s, my mom's in her later 70s. Not too late 70s, just in case she's listening. But they still worry about us to this day. I'm in
Yeah.
my 50s. So that never stops.
My dad's like, text me when you get home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, it used to be like, don't really need to do that. Now I'm like, it makes them feel better.
Oh yeah.
And so just do it. But ultimately, if your kid knows, I mean, that's what I understand. Your kids aren't going to know right now, but they feel it. They when he makes that comment on a post on social media, it means they know. They
Yeah.
ultimately know. They might not admit it a whole lot. Be your kid's number one cheerleader.
It's so awesome to hear so I have I have a one that's more outspoken and one that is a little more quiet. She's an observer, but she's still very social. But when they do say something nice, especially for her, my daughter, it's quite nice to
Yeah,
hear
and there'll
them.
be more of it over time.
Yeah, I think the key, especially as our kids get older, is connection. Because we can't micromanage and control everything that they're receiving. So
Mm-mm.
we need to teach them discernment and critical thinking. And we need to stay connected so they're not afraid to come to us when times are hard or when they face challenges. So that is why, yes, being
Yeah.
present.
I mean, my kids tell my wife way too much, and it's a byproduct of just incredible trust.
Yeah.
Sometimes she's like, I don't need to know all that, but she's always in the know.
Yeah.
And it's not really, it's not in a helicopter way at all. It's just she was always there for them and their friends,
And they
that
feel
they feel
safe.
safe.
They feel safe. And
They
that's what
feel
you
safe.
want.
And that doesn't need to be both parents or everybody, whatever. It just, if they feel safe, they're going to come to you. And by the way, that doesn't mean that they're not going to do stupid stuff that gets them in trouble, because there's a pretty good chance you did the same thing.
Oh
I know
gosh,
I did.
yes. I remind myself of that and I'm like, I lived, I'm still here. And I try really not to hover the lawnmower, parent or whatever they call it now. There's a couple different
Yeah, I
names,
don't
but the
know.
helicopter parent, the lawnmower parent, because they need their space while they're still here. Because I have a 17-year-old and a almost 15-year-old now. they're gonna like you said, I'm not gonna let them fail to the point where they're going to harm themselves,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna let them fail to the point where they're gonna feel a little pain from their choices, because then I'm here to support them and coach them through that, and that will serve them well later in life.
It's just going to serve them well when they're certainly in college, if that's the route they're going, or not. It's going to serve them well when they are part of teams in the workforce, and suddenly they're not first trying to figure out, wait a minute. I mean, here you got it. You've said it before. Better, not perfect.
Yeah.
If everything you have done has been to try to be perfect,
Right.
it's going to be really hard to handle it when you're not perfect.
Right.
And oh, by the way, not being perfect doesn't mean you didn't win or that you didn't get something out of it. It's one of
Right.
the reasons why I love to ask a podcast guest, what's the biggest swing and miss you've taken and what did you learn from it?
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that you get better.
Well, we learn more from
Our
the hard
failures,
moments
yeah.
when we fail. One of my other favorite books is Fail, Fail Again, Fail Better. And there is, for whatever reason, there's such a negative association with failure, but failure is required. Like you just have to take steps and fail and try it again and try it a different way. And yeah, and the more you do that, the less scary failure is. You get more comfortable with it. And any successful person, even athlete, has failed more than they've succeeded, probably.
And experience in failing makes you, it just makes you better. It makes you able to be more successful because you're not held up by all that failure.
Resilient.
It's resilience. I mean, I always smile when people ask me, do you get nervous in front of a television camera? And I say, no. Do you get nervous when you walk into work every day?
Right.
It's the same thing. We've just put more on it because most people don't know a television broadcaster. You only see it from the other side,
Right.
right? But really, in the end, I've worked really hard at this profession. Does that mean I get it right every day? Far from it. I screw something up every single day, but it very rarely bothers me.
Right.
When it does bother me, that's when I sit down and I say, okay, why is it bothering me? What did I do wrong? Is there something I can do to not make this happen again next time? Or is this just one of those things? So if there's not an answer to it, then live in the failure and live in the comfort and the confidence of moving on. And so I'm doing live TV 6 to 7 days a week for 6 months, 2 shows per day, a pregame and a postgame show without a script, no teleprompter. Stuff's not going to go right, but there's a pretty good chance when it doesn't go right, one, people may not even know. Two, I've been there before. I know what I did wrong, or I know how to help myself with the situation, or I understand that sometimes it's just part of it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Cause yeah, like I did a live morning show last year and yeah, I was like, okay, live. Yeah, we can do that.
Well,
But it's
the equivalent is, this is the best one I can give you, is that for all the people out there that if they hear their voice recorded or on a,
right.
what we used to say, an answering machine or voicemail, I don't like the way I sound, because you're not used to hearing yourself.
Right.
But eventually you don't even notice it. I don't even notice my voice anymore
No,
because I've
and
heard it so much. And that's
100%.
very freeing.
100%. Cause I used to hate to watch videos of myself speaking or talking because I was a teacher right out of college and we had to record ourselves and it was painful to watch. And now, yeah, my voice is on my podcast. I'm immune to it as well. So it's just anything that's uncomfortable. It's only uncomfortable it gets easier the more you do it. And that's what
Repetition.
kids need to understand. So 100%. And we are all human. So we've all experienced that, lived through that. And just sometimes I think as adults, we just need to remind ourselves to remember what it was like to be afraid of the thing they're afraid of or
Mhm.
fearful of. We just are so far removed from that experience. But so you're keynote speaking now.
Mhm.
So, and you have your podcast. So tell us a little bit about if somebody wants to listen to your podcast or hire you as a speaker, like what do you like to talk about? And you touched on a little bit in the beginning, but like, and how we find you. And I'll put everything in the show notes. I'll put your website, your podcast, all of that good stuff.
I'll do all of those things. It
That's
would
right.
not
Buy us
hurt my, it
books.
would not hurt my feelings at all. But it's so much fun. It's this started, I stumbled into speaking accidentally. How many speakers out there
Which is another
said, I want to do this?
top 3 greatest fears for most people's public speaking. I think it's in the top 3.
And not everybody, most people are not going to say, okay, I want to be a motivational speaker. I want to be a professional speaker. I stumbled onto it. It would seem like an obvious thing. Oh, you're already on TV. It is totally different, but same thing, more reps, more over and over and over again. I started it about 9 years ago, and I understood it. I've got my off, my winters off. I don't sit still very well anyway. And somebody mentioned trying it because I had a speech that I was doing for a local organization, and they said, you could turn that into a business. And sure enough, that's happened. And now it's not a side hustle. It's a main hustle. TV will always come first. I'm not going to miss a game because that's where it all starts for me. But there's so many lessons learned. I always like to say that, yeah, if you're hiring me for a sports banquet, then maybe I'll go more sports heavy. But if I'm doing my job right, any story that I tell, any lesson learned that I share from the sports world should apply to someone that has never watched a baseball game or hates sports. And if I can get that audience, which is always my goal, I can get everybody else. So I'm talking about culture, leadership, teamwork, communication, managing failure, all of these type of things, and now as well change in the workplace because people are getting, maybe this has always happened, but I think with the rapid speed of everything in AI right now and
Right.
automation, that everything is moving faster than it ever has. We have more generations in the workplace than we've ever had. We have more disconnect between people than we've ever had because the pandemic and because of all the AI automation and social media. It's been a lot easier to do these things not sitting face to face,
Right.
or maybe doing it via Zoom, which is fine, or maybe just sending a text message or social media. And so we've lost a lot of those skills. So for me, we always heard about, even when I started the speaking, that my focus is more on the soft skills, building trust. My main keynote is winning trust. But now it feels like with the rapid pace of everything, these quote unquote soft skills have become harder skills, not
Right.
just for the generation coming into the workforce right now, the Gen Zs, and then after them, the Gen Alphas, but for the older generation, the millennials and the boomers that are saying, wait, I don't know how to deal with these 20 somethings. And so it's hard on both ends. And there's got to be room in the middle to meet. If I can do it at 53 years old, figuring out how to live
Right.
in a world of 20 something year old athletes. And oh, by the way, it's their show, not mine. I'm the one that has to figure out how to make it work. If I can do it,
Right.
anybody can do it.
Right. No, that's awesome. And it's so true. It's so funny because we talk about a lot of the same things. You talk about it from your experience
Mhm.
in the lens of sports, and I'm doing it from the lens of teaching and being a parent. Because you study younger people, and I got to work with 2-year-olds. I learned so much about just psychology and human behavior. So people are just
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so your books, I will put the links in the show notes. I'll put your website in
Yeah,
the show
website's the
notes.
easiest way to get me, joelgoldbergmedia.com. I mean, there
Okay.
are a million ways. Find me on social media, LinkedIn, all those places. And I do all, keynotes, breakout sessions, workshops, virtual stuff. Whatever it is, all of these things. The main speech is trust, though. The second one is culture. They're pretty similar. The third one is change in the workplace. The fourth one is grit and resilience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
So
much
good to
for
be with you,
coming
Kori.
on, and I appreciate your time. And thank you guys for tuning in. I will be sure to put all of Joel's contact information in the show notes. Thank you. Right. Oop,
There it is.
there we
The
go.
double button. Oh.
Yep, there we